Guys, and welcome back to my kitchen floor.
I wanted to hop in real quick and say the audio in this video might be a little wonky. I had to apply a filter to kind of try to eliminate the refrigerator sounds in the background of this video. I didn't realize that my microphone picked that up. Cool, thanks.
Happy to see you here today. I have a very special video and one that I hope will be helpful to many of you out there. As you guys know, I am a big advocate for feeding dogs, cats, and ferrets a natural raw diet. I actually just recently uploaded my first ebook on feeding ferrets raw food diets, so go check that out if you have yet to read that. But anyways, you guys already know my feelings on processed pet food, raw foods for pets. If you guys are new to the channel, do not forget to hit that subscribe button. And if you do not know me, my name is Bryn. I am a certified pet nutritionist here to share what I know on the channel and my many other social medias. A large portion of my subscriber base still feeds Kibble, and that is just to be expected. Most pet parents feed Kibble. I apologize for the multiple intrusions that will inevitably be occurring in this video because I am on the floor and the floor is very exciting and different. So I wanted to make a video dedicated to discussing how to make kibble diets better for ferrets, and it really does apply also to cats and dogs, but because my channel is primarily ferret-based content, it is going to be more directed towards ferrets, but do keep in mind that all of what I am mentioning in this video can still be utilized for cats and dogs. Specifically, I'm going to be talking about healthy additions that you can make on a day-to-day basis, eat pretty easily at home to make their meals that much better. So the absolute first thing that you're going to want to do above all other things, because a good foundation of health for ferrets, what creates healthy ferrets, is a healthy base food. So the actual bulk of the diet, if you're feeding dry food, the bulk of that should still be fairly nutritious for your ferrets. And as you guys probably already know, there is a wide variety of options on the market for ferrets, and it's a very large spectrum. You have cheap foods full of inappropriate ingredients that goes against the ferret's biology, promotes poor digestion, poor gut health, contains a lot of fillers, a lot of carbs, unnecessary ingredients for a carnivore. You have kind of middle in the road, so they might contain some not so great ingredients. It might be a middle price point, but not entirely an awful food. And then you have the higher end of the spectrum, luxury brands that are going to cost you quite a bit more, but you will be generally getting very good quality nutrients for your ferrets. Thanks again for playing with your squeaky toy as I'm filming this video. The general few rules, sun's kind of in my eyes, the general few rules that I tell people to follow when selecting a base food is going to be high in protein and fat from animal sources only. So your pet food can contain both or either or of plant or animal sources of both protein and fat. Ideally, you're going to want a food that provides the bulk of the protein and fat from animal sources. And this is because animal sources are much more bioavailable, meaning the nutrients are better digested, absorbed, and utilized by your ferrets. Unfortunately, a lot of pet food manufacturers have decided to cut corners because there is a lack of significant evidence, like science-based published evidence studies that have been done to prove the negative detriments that plant-based nutrition does to our carnivores. Specifically for ferrets, we really don't have that information. However, it is a fact that the ferret is an obligate carnivore and they cannot be healthfully sustained on plant-based sources for every part of their nutrition, or even just for the majority of it. And again, like I said, while we do lack those published studies to show that to us, it's one of those things where we don't really need that published evidence to tell us what a carnivore needs. It is just their DNA, it is how they are built. We have all of that information. We also have the information from their wild ancestors In the wild, the ferrets are closely related to the polecat. The polecat, we know what they mainly dine on in the wild, and it is not plant-based sources. Another thing that you're going to want to watch out for is a food that has minimal carbs and starches, fillers. You may see some forms of this, such as fibers and prebiotics, which can actually be beneficial to most ferrets. You may also use plant sources for antioxidants to preserve freshness, and that's also something that you might see, something that I do suggest having in the diet, especially for dry food, to keep it fresh, because the fats in these foods are prone to oxidation. These antioxidants help prevent that oxidation, so that amount of minimal sources is fine in my educated opinion. So in order, if I went back to feeding dry foods for any reason, I would use one of these brands. The first brand being Feline Naturals. It's actually like a subcategory from the brand Canine Naturals. They produce both dog and cat food, and specifically I am referring to their freeze-dried line for cats. Now, this is a food that I've talked about on my channel previously, and I really do like this food for ferrets. It contains very minimal ingredients, and the ingredients that it does offer are all functional for your carnivore. And if you're interested in learning more about that brand, I will have the link to that video above. And then number 2 would be Ziwi Peak Air Dried Cat. So this is different from Feline Naturals. Feline Naturals is freeze-dried, so it's a little bit closer to raw foods, whereas Ziwi Peak is air-dried, sort of like dehydrated. It looks very similar to jerky texture. And this is also a really, really good food. This brand constantly is impressing me with both their quality and dedication to providing healthy food for our animals, finally. And unfortunately, they are both quite costly, because if you want to offer a very good healthy diet for your animals, it's going to most of the time be more money than a grocery store brand food, low tier foods. And if I couldn't do any of those two foods for whatever reason, I would gravitate towards Stella and Chewy's freeze-dried cat diets. It is not my favorite though, due to the length of the ingredient list on their products, as well as their use of HPP on their products, which I do have an article all on the process of HPP on my blog if you're interested in learning more. And then if I had to pick an actual like kibble, so food that isn't freeze-dried raw or dehydrated or anything like that, it would be Dr. Elsie's Clean Protein Chicken. And some who do feed this food do suggest mixing it with another food to promote better digestion. For whatever reason, tend to have a harder time maintaining a good stool consistency, which isn't entirely uncommon because it is not entirely a natural diet for our ferrets to be consuming. But if that's all that you can do at the moment, that is okay. I would choose that food just personally with my experience in nutrition. And I am not a huge fan of the popular brands fed to ferrets such as Ysong, Marshall's, Zupreme, Wild Harvest, and this is based off of my personal experience with said foods, experiences of others, and of course my education in pet nutrition. I do have a list that I made back in 2020 comparing a bunch of different dry foods fed to ferrets, so go check that chart out. And if you are not in the position to change foods right now for whatever reason, there are still some things you can do to better the kibble for your ferrets, and these are also things you can do if you feed freeze-dried raw foods or dehydrated raw foods as well. The number one suggestion that I have for anybody still feeding a dry food would be to add back in that crucial moisture that kibble is really lacking. Water is the most critical nutrient that ferrets need to both survive and thrive. Without it, they are at risk of various conditions. Kibble is only about 7 to 10% water, when the natural diet of the ferret is about 80%. That is a very large difference. Adding water or even homemade bone broth is a really easy way to replenish that lack of moisture. Helps keep your ferrets hydrated, helps keep their organs functioning properly, and promote better digestion. I do have a recipe for ferret safe bone broth on my website, on my Instagram. I make it all the time, and my ferrets really, really do love it. It adds even an extra bit of flavor to their meals as well. If you do feed freeze-dried raw, it really isn't an option to add moisture. You really should be adding water to freeze-dried foods before feeding, because it is pretty much meat with all of the water taken out to preserve freshness. So you're gonna wanna add that back in. A common question that I get asked when recommending this is, well, Bryn, you know, if we're free feeding our ferrets and we're doing wet food, doesn't this spoil the food faster and we can't actually leave it down for the amount of time that ferrets need? And my answer is absolutely, it does spoil your meals faster. So you're gonna wanna be good about switching the food out. The extra effort and thought is worth avoiding expensive vet bills due to urinary issues and just a dehydrated ferret. And in addition to that, I know I've talked about it in great length on old videos of mine. If you're still relying on a water bottle as their sole source of water, this is also not going to promote adequate water intake as well, because it is not a natural way for them to get their water. It is not easy for them to get their water in this manner. So a lot of the times, ferrets that are given water solely from water bottles are also chronically dehydrated on top of being fed dry foods, and it's just not a very good equation. Number 2, add raw eggs. Trust me, raw eggs is one of the best things that you can add to your ferret's diet on any food. I do recommend adding eggs separately from the food that you feed, because the fats do tend to spoil the food much faster than if it were fed separately. It may be tempting to mix everything all into a nice little healthy slurry for them, but unless your ferret is eating everything in one sitting, I would advise against doing that. It is also a good idea to whisk the yolk and the whites together so that your ferret is benefiting from both. A very big misconception that has been floating around the ferret world for years now is that you should absolutely never feed your ferret egg whites, and this is just not true. It has definitely been very misconstrued. Basically, if you were to only feed egg whites for a very long time, your ferret could run the risk of biotin deficiency. Now, this is not an issue if you are feeding eggs in the correct amounts, so you're not overfeeding eggs, and you're whisking the yolk and whites together. Eggs are a very nutritious source of readily available nutrients for your ferrets, and the cool thing about eggs is they actually act as a natural hairball preventative. Ferrets can't cough up hairballs like cats can. They actually need to go through the entire digestive tract, which is why hairballs can be very dangerous for your ferrets. So feeding eggs weekly is a really good idea to prevent that, especially during shedding seasons. And the dosage depends on the type of egg, as well as the just general tolerance of the ferret. Some ferrets can only tolerate a very small amount of eggs, whereas others can tolerate more. So I'm going to give you just my recommendations and what I've been doing for my ferrets. For duck eggs, I only do that once a week, split between a few ferrets. Duck eggs are very, very large. Quail eggs, once or twice a week, maybe 1 to 2 eggs per ferret. Don't go overboard. I know quail eggs are really cute and tiny, so it's tempting to feed a lot more. They're actually very packed in dense nutrition, so you're going to want to keep that minimal as well. Chicken eggs, 1 or twice a week, 1 egg split between 2 ferrets is what works best for me. And I'm not doing duck, quail, and chicken every week. I'm only doing 1 of those. And eggs should ideally be pastured from a local farm stand if you can do that. A very common addition that many ferret owners already do is adding fish oil, specifically salmon oil, to their ferrets' diets. And my recommendation would be to add canned fish instead of fish oil, because fish oil does go rancid very, very quickly. In fact, many experts even suspect that it's far rancid before it even gets to your shelf. If you're one of those people who are adding salmon oil to every single meal, you are overdosing and putting your ferrets at risk. Instead of fish oil, opt for the real deal. Once or twice a week, add in canned fish like sardines in water with no salt added. This can be purchased at most regular grocery stores. And to prevent spoilage, I would suggest feeding that separately. And canned fish is already pre-cooked, so the chances of it affecting your ferret's digestion, especially those that have a hard time processing both raw meats along with their kibble, is going to be low. They will likely be able to digest it just fine along with their kibble. Fish is a powerful source of healthy omega-3, magnesium, vitamin D, and much more. If you can't source canned fish for whatever reason, you can try to see how your ferrets tolerate raw frozen fish. And the reason why I say raw frozen fish, it is recommended to freeze any fresh fish for a couple weeks prior to feeding. And so if your ferret has no signs of digestive distress, you are more than welcome to continue feeding a bit of a raw fish here and there. I really like raw salmon, raw whitefish for my ferrets. And if you can't source canned or raw frozen fish for whatever reason, you can also do freeze-dried fish treats. And if you can't do any of those, then I would recommend doing fish oil, but it has to be very, very minuscule amounts spread out over the course of the week. I think the dosing is a half teaspoon. You're gonna have to Google that one, but it's very, very small, and a lot of people tend to overdose it. And then you're going to want to avoid things like cod liver oil, which is very high in vitamin A, which is fat soluble and can offset the nutrients that they're already getting from their base diet. It can be quite dangerous if you're overdosing vitamin A, and of course other nutrients as well. My fourth suggestion would be to add freeze-dried blue mussels. This is something that you've probably never heard before. I mean, like, blue mussels, hello, but blue mussels actually provide lots of fatty acids and trace nutrients such as manganese. These are especially great for ferrets with dry, itchy, brittle coats. However, the freeze-drying process does denature some of those nutrients that would be provided otherwise, but it is still a healthy whole food addition and a very good treat to offer your ferrets if they do like it. Cooked mussels also work. The reason why I specified cooked and not raw is because all shellfish should be cooked prior to feeding. Green-lipped mussels also work, and the same rules apply for those. My fifth suggestion would be to add probiotics. This is great for most ferrets, and some foods you might see at the end of the label already contain probiotics. But the thing about probiotics is, if you didn't know, it is healthy bacteria that helps promote good gut health. And unfortunately, the extrusion process and then your ferret's stomach acid, not much is known about how much bacteria is actually left behind after all of those processes and what can actually be utilized by your ferret in the end. So it's a good idea to add in probiotics to most diets for most healthy ferrets, and also for ferrets struggling with specific health conditions. Probiotics work to stimulate a healthy gut microbiome, which encourages a strong immune system, healthy skin and coat, a functional digestive tract, which is very key for a lot of ferrets fed dry foods that tend to have a bit of digestive upset here and there, and irregular stools. There are dairy-based and soil-based probiotics available for ferrets. And yes, I know what you may be thinking, ferrets are technically lactose intolerant. However, in my experience, most ferrets do just fine on dairy-based probiotics. Soil-based is definitely a lot harder to come by, but can still be used. I know you guys have heard me talk about this probiotic product a lot on my channel. It's still something that I highly recommend. It is the Nature's Bounty Probiotic 10. I have been using this for a very, very long time now with all of my animals, and it has always worked very quickly. And they also make for a daily safe addition for ferrets. It's something I would definitely recommend for aging ferrets, ferrets with health conditions, depending on the condition. And it's also great for ferrets that just finished a round of antibiotics, because antibiotics do kill both the good and the bad bacteria in the gut, and your gut needs that healthy bacteria to promote good gut microbiome and all the things that we mentioned before. So probiotics help to replenish that after a course of antibiotics, and just a sprinkle is enough per ferret, and that is something that you can put right into their food. Number 6 is freeze-dried or dehydrated organ meats. Organ meats, like animal hearts and kidneys, make for great additions to any diet, especially for ferrets with sensitive stomachs and cannot tolerate raw organs in addition to their dry foods. I am going to link some really great brands below that have freeze-dried or dehydrated organs. I would definitely suggest choosing freeze-dried over dehydrated for most things because it is closer to the raw form. And then you have freeze-dried green tripe. That would be my last suggestion. So basically there are so many healthy whole food additions that raw feeders feed that you can purchase in freeze-dried form and feed. And while freeze-drying does denature some of the nutrients that would be provided otherwise, it doesn't make it a bad addition at all. Green tripe is especially great for ferrets with sensitive stomachs. And do note, you don't have to feed everything that I just listed for every single meal every day. It's a good idea to toss it all up, switch it up, and additions should always be kept at a minimum. You don't want it to overpower the base food. The base nutrients is going to come from that base food. If you are offering too much, you could be offering way too many calories for your ferret. It could also be offsetting the nutrition from the base food. Also, an important note is that ferrets imprint on the food fed at weaning, meaning they may not be super keen to try anything on this list, and that's totally normal, which is why it is so essential to introduce a variety of foods and treats to your ferrets while they are still young. However, it is not too late when your ferrets grow old. You can certainly get ferrets onto new foods. I have gotten senior ferrets of all ages, most stubborn ferrets, onto raw foods and different treats and so on. It just takes a lot of consistency, time, and patience. So that is my video on healthy additions to make kibble better. I hope you guys learned a thing or two and enjoyed this video. And do not forget to follow me on both of my Instagrams. I have one for the ferrets and my raw feeding, as well as one for Gen, the dog. So I will see you guys in my next video. Thank you guys so much for subscribing and supporting us and buying the book as well. I'm so pleased that so many of you have enjoyed it so far. And big thank you to all of my channel members who have stuck through and have been supporting me all this time. Thank you guys so much. It does not go unnoticed. Bye.